Welcome to Investing Insights, partnered by Right Property Group. This is your host, Phil Tarrant.
Okay, everyone, it's Phil Tarrant here. Welcome to Investing Insights with the Right Property Group. I'm joined by my regular co-hosts from the Right Property Group, directors Steve Waters and Victor Kumar. How you going, guys?
Good, Phil.
Well, mate, how you going?
All right. How's the world of property? You guys are on the front line. You guys are excited about the current marketplace? You're nervous? You got concerns, reservations, or you're pretty bullish, Steve?
I'm excited, to be honest with you. That sounded like a bit of a cliche, but look, this is the environment that we're in at the moment is something that we've been saying that is going to happen and should happen for probably the last 18 months. And from a strategist and buyer's agency point of view, what it does is actually just gives us more choice because it gets rid of the pop-up expert, so to speak. You know, they're out of the market, and it just gives us as investors more choice. So we're pretty excited about it. And at the end of the day, there is a lot of scaremongering going on, but let's be real. Money's still cheap. You know, we've been used to cheaper, dangerously cheap, so to speak. So it's all good.
Yeah, and this scenario has been here and before as well. It's just dressed up differently this time around with this cycle.
You've been there before,
Yeah.
then?
Yeah,
How long have you
absolutely.
guys been doing this? As a
2000.
Since 2000. Okay.
So, a few marketplaces all over Australia.
Yeah.
But once again, I just really think that people have got to pull their head in a little bit. This is normality.
The sky's not falling in.
Yeah, it's not bad at all.
So the doom and gloom merchant. So my question to you, is it always a good time to buy property?
It is always a good time to buy property if you have the fundamentals in place, and part of that is finance, more so than ever now, and that you have your risk mitigation in place, and the numbers work, absolutely.
So you guys are out there, you're seeing a lot of opportunities popping up now for good or better buys than what we've seen previously. How do you measure that?
I don't think there's certainly not more property on the market. What there is there are more days on market. So the craziness has gone out of the market, especially in Sydney, in the outer areas, perhaps the western corridors.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a bit north and south. Certainly the craziness has gone out of the Brisbane market as well, which is good. And by days on market, I mean, instead of something selling in 3 days or before it even reaches the general public, we've usually got sort of 15 to sort of 20 days now, which is reasonable, as long as it's priced well, and we can press a little harder in terms of negotiation, whether it be just on terms and on the dollar amount, or if it's terms and conditions, which is once again, finance, longer cool-off periods, longer finance clauses, all helps.
And just to go further on that, certainly the values aren't coming back. It's not that the properties are starting to devalue. It's just that there are less buyers in the market that can qualify for finance, and therefore the frenzy's gone out of the market, and you're still paying for properties that are what they're worth, as opposed to in say a year ago, where people were paying money hand over fist just to get into the market, and that's what's really changed. So instead of getting 40 people in an open home, the agents are probably getting 14 people in an open home.
Well, they're having to work.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They're not selling themselves, which is good. But having said all of that, there is certain parts of the market that perhaps have come back, and rightly so, because they were overvalued to begin with because of the stupidity or the craziness in the market. Off the plans, I think if you're looking to settle an off the plan in the immediate future, start thinking about plan B, especially if it's perhaps in an area that has come back a little bit. And the same with house and land packages if you're an investor. So we're talking about investors here more so than homeowners, because as we all know, investor finance is tightening every single day, whether that be in terms of serviceability or LVR position. So you need to have that mitigation in place, or a plan B, which is what you should always have anyway.
So to summarise, greater powers being put back into the hand of the buyer.
Of the buyer, absolutely.
Okay, so in these type of markets, investors, obviously it's very innate to you because you do it every single day, but for your investor in the market looking to buy right now, is there anything in particular they should be keeping in mind? Just push harder potentially, or look at how else you can structure deals?
Well, the first thing is that you need to make sure that you absolutely qualify for finance. Just because the bank said 2 months ago that finance will be not an issue, doesn't mean that finance won't be an issue 2 months later. So that's the very first thing that you need to do. And then, of course, push a little bit harder in terms of pricing. Maybe start a little bit lower, or put different terms on the contracts, because you've got less competition, less people competing for the same property. Because realistically, there are less buyers that are as assertive as someone that's finance ready.
Good tips. A big focus of the series of podcasts we've been doing for the Investing Insights of the Right Property Group, Victor, has been around the acquisition phase of property. So we've been very focused. And if you haven't looked through some of the episodes that we've done in the past, they're very much about how, where, what to buy. We haven't really touched too much on, you accumulate this property portfolio that hopefully is delivering good cash and capital growth. But we haven't really sort of focused on the end game. So when do you stop and why do you stop and what happens after that? So I really want to just pick your brain today and Steve's brain today on this. And you work with a lot of clients and you work quite intimately with them in the acquisition phase. But have you had many clients get to the end of their property investment journey and said, okay, that's enough for me, and let's plan for that? How does that work?
Yeah, it does, and it comes back right to the beginning, where we've set out a goal and we've gone out to acquire the properties to achieve the goals, and along the way we've corrected the cash flow by either stopping from buying or adding a secondary dwelling or buying a particular type of property, whether it is to boost our equity or to boost our cash flow. And then there comes a point in time where you need to seriously sit down and say, okay, do we stop now? And where is this all leading to? Because it can be very addictive, and what you'll find is that you sort of think that, okay, I have to buy another property now because it's been a quarter, it's been 6 months, been a year, for some of the more addicted ones, been a week. But there comes a point of time where you actually need to physically sit down and work out where's this all heading to, and actually correct it to the market, address it in terms of your end goals, and change strategies or implement the add-on strategies to actually start either consolidating, which I mean in terms of cash flow, or to actually look at paying all of the loans down so that you're actually getting to your end income. And a lot of people actually lose sight of that, and they get caught up in the frenzy of buying, and they're forever buying, and you hit retirement age and you've still got massive debt around you. Or you've made a few mistakes because you then start becoming a little bit too bulletproof in your opinion, and start buying the wrong types of properties or start speculating because you had several wins in a row. And it's really important to actually step back and relook at things.
So big part with the end game is that, and we've spoken about it in the past, it's about goal setting from the absolute get-go. So building
Absolutely.
a portfolio with an end game in mind. And I think a lot of the traps, Steve, that people fall into is that they just organically end up with a property investment portfolio and they haven't put too much thought into what they choose or plan to do with that in the future. So it comes back to building a portfolio from the start, which is always with the view of the end game in mind. I know from experience, I've started buying properties and my goals have changed quite a lot since when I started, because you do more of it, you get more confident, you understand the market, you understand. Yeah. So your overall goal, the goalpost keeps changing, but
because the education changes.
Because the education changing. So how do you balance these?
Look, how do you balance it? Look, the way that we put things together as an investor, myself and Vic, and the types of properties we buy allow us to have that flexibility as our lives change, as our situations change, as the price of money changes, the whole environment changes. By the types of properties we have, which have relatively good cash flow, they're affordable, we can move with the market. And our end goal, or when we decide to perhaps cash out of a particular area, whether it be in a good time or in a good market or a bad market, our strategy allows us to do that, or the property type allows us to do that. So if we come all the way back to the beginning, that's even before goals, is actually identifying what sort of strategy and what your limits are. And then, of course, there's the property type, which ties in with that. But the goal is about the cash it derives for you at the end of the day, because that's what you live on. You don't live on equity, you live on cash flow. So you need to have a very clear plan, and we've talked about that in the earlier podcasts on how to get there.
And one of the things I keep reiterating to my clients is that you got to divorce the two, the equity and the cash flow. Equity is wealth, but cash flow is lifestyle, and we want the lifestyle. Yeah, the wealth can happen in the background. So the focus should always be to free up the cash flow from the portfolio, so it comes directly to you. Now, obviously, it's not going to happen overnight, and you may have glitches along the way, such as the GFC, which if you're prepared for it and stuck to the fundamentals,
It's a hugely profitable point in
absolutely.
time.
So it just needs to be fluid with where the market is, where your life is, and certainly coming back and reviewing your goals over and over again to keep it relevant. Because you could have started out with stars in your eyes and say, no, I want to earn $250,000 out of my portfolio. But 5 years down the track, it might not be relevant anymore. It could be that you've started a business and therefore cash flow is no longer an issue. Or the other side of it is you could have brought forward your retirement, and therefore the 250 is no longer relevant. You want to get to, say, 100K to fund your early retirement in that sense. Yeah, and I say the word retirement in inverted commas, of course, because each person's definition of retirement is very different.
And this is the challenge. Everyone's circumstances is very different. My view with property investment, and we speak about this a lot on this podcast, is why do you invest in property? You invest in property for wealth creation, right?
That's right.
There's a lot of benefits with it also. Like, it's quite good fun, it's challenging and all this sort of stuff. But why do you invest in property? You don't do it. You do it to make some money, right? And going to your point,
and it's not a hobby.
Yeah, equity is wealth, and cash flow is lifestyle. So you want to be able to balance, as you accumulate property, a lifestyle which you enjoy, but with the creation of wealth over time. So
that's right.
People's end game is always going to be very different. So we're speaking about, say at a point in time you choose, I want to be retired now, which means I don't want to work, but I'll need money to live. So my property investment portfolio should be generating me income so I can live. So when you get to your end game, what are the options available to you? So you can either sell down your whole portfolio and get cashed up and travel the world. You can sell off some of it to pay down your debt so you have no mortgage whatsoever. Or you might want to be completely debt-free, so you have an asset which you can pass down to your children and your children's children and create generational wealth. So balancing what to do with this in your end game is quite a personal thing.
Very much so, yeah. And one person's view on that would be very different to someone else. The reality is, and this is something I need to flag well up front, is that when you do sell a property, there is a tax event. So, you got to pay tax. So you got to plan that. And also, when you're selling a property, you're also selling all of the future capital gains with it. Yeah, so you can't take that lightly. However, nothing beats holding the property long term, because over a period of time, any property that you've bought that ticks all the fundamental boxes will become cash positive and will become quite equity rich. So one of the fundamental ways of getting to your end game is to actually hold the property long term, and making sure that it's not costing you an arm and a leg to hold it long term, and you're able to weather the changes in finance, changes in the market, changes in your lifestyle along the way as well. And one of the things that I do and Steve does is we sit down with our clients and we correct the portfolio along the way to cater for these, so that we are always looking forward towards the end, as to when the cash flow is neutral or positive, or the loans are fully paid out. But we use milestones. So a good example would be that if we have set up a negative cash flow tolerance of, say, $500 a week in the portfolio, when it reaches $450 or $500, we need to actually stop buying and let it consolidate, let time do its magic, or find a way of boosting the cash flow, whether it is via regular rent reviews, whether it's by restructuring your loans, whether it is by doing a secondary dwelling to neutralize the negative cash flow. So finding that $500 extra per week within the portfolio, and then you've then got a stable portfolio, a stable platform from where you can look forward and say, okay, what do I do next? What most people tend to do is when they hit that threshold, first of all, they haven't identified the threshold, so therefore they wake up and say, okay, my lifestyle is being impacted because of my properties, and then they have to sell down. So they haven't thought it out through in that sense. And that's, I think, in my opinion, that's one of the prime reasons why a lot of investors, they start out really well, but they haven't played the full game. and it's important to last the full game.
Well, if we talk about the now, and
Yeah.
going back to your earlier comments about how the environment's changed, more specifically what the money finance environment is, there are going to be a whole heap of investors out there. They're going to be in a world of pain in the next
Couple of months, really.
Well,
Yeah.
couple of months all the way up to maybe even a couple of years, where, as a really good example, is they come off their interest-only terms into P&I and they don't service.
Yep.
Purely because they haven't done their projections correctly to begin with. They've done it at 3.99% interest rates at interest only. They haven't forward projected that that's not normality, and that it will roll over into principal and interest, and that the cost of money will go up. And they haven't had a threshold to begin with. They didn't establish that threshold to begin with. So they're going to be in a world of pain. And as someone who, or investors that have actually taken care of business and have made those future projections, they might be picking up some property at a discounted rate, all things being fair and equal. But so we're talking about, on one hand, to retire the debt, buy or create a portfolio, keep half, sell half is probably the easiest way, but that happens over a period of a long period of time, and there's nothing wrong with a long period of time. Or there is other ways where you can be perhaps a little bit more involved, should we say, in trying to retire debt. Now, we use this term retire debt because for myself and for Vic, the best asset that you can have is one with no debt. That way you are in full control. Now, there are some strategies out there and some investors out there and advisors that say, look, debt's okay as long as it's within its boundaries of cash flow, and as Vic said, income will go up over 10, 20, 30 years, and if the debt stays relevantly the same, well, then you're in a positive scenario. Yep, there's nothing wrong with that strategy. It's just not our strategy. Our strategy is actually about some point in time retiring the debt because, as I said, you're in full control.
And not having to wait the 30, 40 years to
Yeah,
do that.
so the other way is
So you can manufacture the retirement. debt.
manufacture it, correct.
So a couple of terms that we're using here, which our listeners might not be familiar with, and I'll get back to retiring debt. But to your point beforehand, Victor, can you explain to our listeners? You said that all properties will become cash positive at a point in time. Can you just explain that dynamic?
Sure. I'll just use my very first property that I bought, right? So I bought in Currants Hill, which is a suburb in the council area of Camden in New South Wales. And that was my first owner-occupied property. I bought that for $137,000. 3-bedroom house, brick veneer, was about 15 years old at that time. And I bought that in 1998. I moved out of that house in 2006 and rented that out. It got $285 a week rent at that time. Its value was $340. Right, so I had done well. Instinctively, I had chosen well because I was a migrant and I wanted to be close to infrastructure and all the sort of stuff, right? So things that we look for normally in an investment property. So it worked out by default. Now, today that property is worth $600K. My rent on that, which currently is vacant, and I'm asking $430 a week just to get a tenant in really quickly. The market rent there is $450. Steve's laughing because I had to drop $20. So the market rent there is $450. So if we assume $450 and we assume the original debt of $137,000, that's massively positive cash flow in its own right. Yeah. So, but that's because it's 18 odd years have gone by. And the property has gone through 2 property cycles at the very least. And that's the secret, is you've got to hold the property through at least 1 property cycle for it to mature before you'll start seeing the true rewards of your labor.
And that's only if you buy it right to
Yeah,
begin
that's
with.
right. Yeah,
It could be 2
yeah.
cycles, if you've bought it incorrectly or at the top of the market.
Yeah. So, and that's what I mean by it becoming cash positive over a period of time. Yeah, and as Steve said, you buy it well to begin with, buy it in the right areas that are investment grade areas, and making sure that there's infrastructure going, there's increasing population. It is within, depending on the property cycle, within the metropolitan area or a centre of influence, and just then hold it for long term.
And we've spoken in some of the previous podcasts around what those fundamentals are, so make sure you go back and check them out. Steve, just to pick you up on one of your terminology you've used, and it's about retiring debt. So this means that you don't have debt on the property.
That you've paid it out.
Okay.
Yep, you hold title. Or at the very least, you might have $1 as an example, but have a massive offset or line of credit or redraw, so that you've got liquidity within that asset, because that's important as well.
Okay, so let's go through the ways that you can retire. You can temporarily retire debt by having an offset against it. So it means that you don't pay any interest on it.
Yeah, if you're going to go, correct. But if you were going to go that path to retire the debt but have the offset, that's probably not the best product to have. You'd probably want a redraw or something like that, or a line of credit.
Okay.
Yep. And not across every property, maybe just one or two to give you enough liquidity. Yeah.
So how else can you retire debt? So not have debt on a property?
Well, we've talked about time in the market, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 cycles, whatever it may be, so that you actually create a portfolio big enough to reach your income goal.
Which sort of answers the question, when is the right time to buy property?
Exactly.
Last year,
or the year before.
Yeah.
2000.
That's right.
But by manufacture, so our last podcast episode was about manufacturing equity, I think, off memory. You can actually do what we call chunk deals, which is essentially manufacturing equity, but on a larger scale. So hopefully when it comes time to retire your debt and you want to use this method, you've got a bit of experience behind you, so you can renovate, you can subdivide, or you've got the team to do it for you, and perhaps even develop. Now, I'm not talking rows of townhouses or units, because that's a little bit sort of too
Different
far.
game.
Yeah. But if we go back to some of the recent larger equity purchases that we've done, so there was a small block of units that we purchased in the western corridor of Sydney, probably 5 or 6 years back now, and we strata subdivided them. Now, that made one massive equity on the way in, plus the growth was there. Now, if that's all we ever did, we could sell those, take the profit, and then throw it against one of the other mortgages we had to be an unencumbered position, or 30% LVR, or do a renovation, like a big renovation. And sometimes it's not a matter of, well, let's do the renovation today, let's look for the product today or the property today to do the renovation, because they may not be there. It's about actually timing the market. And I think earlier on, either you or I said, Vic, about the GFC was actually a fantastic time to make money. It wasn't because property was necessarily cheap, even though it was because things were more negotiable. We made our money on the way in. So we were doing blocks of units and townhouses and half burnt down properties and termite damaged properties, which we love as a side note. But we were able to manufacture massive equity instantly via smart renovations, because there's always a buyer at the right price on a finished product, so to speak. So creating these chunks of money, obviously net chunks of money, because there's tax involved and what a tax event, as Victor called it, we could then throw that against lines of credit, offsets, redraws, whatever it may be, to reduce the LVR, therefore improve the cash flow to a point that we were comfortable with, whatever that may have been at the time. It's about being patient. It's about having the flexibility within your portfolio and your cash flow and liquidity to be able to take advantages of those events when they arise.
So Victor, what's your thoughts on, can you retire debt by paying off your loan principal and interest, or it just takes way too long and you never get there?
Yeah, it takes way too long, because if you look at and if you Google this, how principal and interest work, usually when you take out a loan, the first 5 years of a principal and interest loan, you're paying more of the interest than the principal component anyway. It's only after the 15th year onwards that you're really on a 25-year mortgage. That's right. Yeah, so you're starting to make significant dent in the principal amount. So it takes way too much time. And you could do this a lot faster, although it is a lot more inefficient in that sense by doing the chunk deals. Inefficient in the sense that, yes, you've got to pay tax along the way. But, don't lose the sight of the fact that you're only paying tax because you're making money. Yeah, and this is what people get. It gets lost on people. That, I can't sell a property, or I can't do a buy, renovate, or sell, or do a construction because I'm going to pay too much tax. The ways of minimizing tax, get advice up front to minimize the tax legally, and you've made money, so you're paying tax. That's how the world goes around.
So this all sounds really complicated to me, right? We're talking about a lot of different concepts and theories. When you're planning for an end game, so you obviously want to have people are planning for retirement, and you want a nice retirement. So what is the best way to work out how to go about doing this? Is it about having a number, a dollar value that you want to comfortably retire on, passive income? Should that be your benchmark and build your strategy around that number?
Yeah, I always advocate that you try and pick a goal that is very close to your gross income, your PAYG income in that sense, because that's a number that you are it's tangible to you, relate with that number. So it's not something that you've plucked out of the sky to say that, I want $1 million. It doesn't work because, we don't connect with it. Yet if we said, I want to have $150,000 in cash flow, and that's your current income, that's something you're relating to. And you can then quite comfortably say that, okay, I can get to this number by doing X, Y, and Z. And that X, Y, and Z depends on how much capital you've got right now, your borrowing capacity, your ability to make decisions, and then that revolves around what the market's doing, what's going to happen in your life, such as, are you going to start a family, or are you going to change jobs along the way? Are you going to take a step back in terms of income and all this sort of stuff? So that needs to get realigned. Then you need to build a baseline of properties so that it becomes your cornerstone. And what people tend to do wrong is they jump in and they start wanting to do the chunk deals or the subdivisions or the developments, the small developments, right from the word go. And these can have a tendency of going wrong if the market goes against you. So if it takes too long, or your trades are taking way too long, or you hit a snag with council, then because you've got a baseline portfolio in place, it can actually rescue you in that sense. Or if a GFC comes along, you've got the cash flow behind you, you've got the asset behind you, so that you're not dependent 100% on the outcome of the property that you're doing right now. You've got the support behind you. And that's really important that you look at it this way. And as you're building the portfolio in terms of your baseline, along the way, you need to do mini consolidations. Now, one of the mini consolidations, you actually stop buying for a little while. The other is to sit down and do a review to make sure that you're really dealing with real numbers and not pie in the sky stuff, and you're not fudging the numbers so that it makes you feel good. I mean, we do this on a daily basis, Steve. Yeah. And once you've done that, it may be that you need to correct the cash flow before you move any further. So you're resetting. And that could be something as simple as building a granny flat on a property that was specifically bought with a future in mind, to say that when my cash flow reaches this level, I will then bring forward this construction and therefore negate some of the negative cash flow in my portfolio. And the trick is to time that absolutely right. And the timing of that, of course, comes from regular reviews of your portfolio and regular reviews of a goal, and still looking forward, say, at least 18 months to say, okay, where am I going to be in 18 months in terms of lending and liquidity in my portfolio?
So, Steve, question for you: How do you stay the course? So you start investing in property with a plan to create some passive income and wealth in the future, and you embark down that path, and you grow and evolve, your education gets better, you become more sophisticated as an investor. So there's a lot of things that you can control, but there's also a lot of things that you're just a victim of circumstance. So the market changes. How do you stay on path, but also flexible and nimble enough to change with the market, so you're not swapping and changing strategies? And you see people do this all the time.
Yeah.
What's your recommendations for our listeners on just staying true to the course?
I'm a big believer in hanging around people that are actually buoyant, for want of a better word, and are doing what you want to do, or perhaps they've done what you want to do.
So don't be the negative. Don't hang around negative merchants. And
and look, don't hang around the negative people. Now, that doesn't mean that conservative people are negative. I'm conservative, but I'm certainly not negative. But to be in a position where you can ride the market out or ride different circumstances within your life, you actually need to be a little bit prepared for that and future-proof, which I think was another subject we've done on the podcast, by having the surplus cash flow available, by having liquidity within your assets, so that if things do change, you're not going to be a victim of that point in time by having to sell at the worst possible time and be a desperate seller.
So always have contingencies, always have a potential out.
Always be in the strong position no matter what the market's doing, and cash flow is king, and liquidity is king.
So that's something you can control, really, is cash
can
flow, right? You can control cash flow buying the right properties.
And having the right loan structure, the right entities, having a bit of foresight, because not everything for the rest of your investing life will be good. There are going to be hard times there. There are going to be changes in the market. now is a perfect example of changes in the market, be it all finance. So those that perhaps were scrambling to get some liquidity now, you may have missed the boat. You should have been doing this 6 months ago because all the writing was on the wall, but you chose to roll the dice, and you can't afford to roll the dice with liquidity and cash flow. It's just a dangerous scenario. Sooner or later, you will get beaten, and it's just not worth that gamble. But I think coming back, Victor mentioned something else earlier on about consolidation. Sometimes the best way to make money is to actually do nothing. There's a point in time.
I've been through a period where we didn't buy for a couple of years. And
Absolutely.
it was brilliant on our portfolio, just went up in value.
I know, right?
Our deposition didn't change because we weren't refinancing.
Absolutely.
So.
And you don't have to buy all the time. And sometimes when you get bored and you force the numbers, that's when you actually lose money. So sometimes consolidation is actually pretty cool.
So what do you do, Victor, when it all starts going wrong, or you shouldn't really be in that position if you're connected enough to your portfolio?
Absolutely. You shouldn't be in that position to begin with. Yeah. But if it does start unraveling, don't bury your head in the sand. You need to start seeking recommendation and advice of experts. Someone that's been in the market for a few cycles, not someone that's just come in this cycle. They'll be able to guide you through that maze, because a lot of times the solution is pretty obvious. People panic, and people start selling down because they haven't thought all of the options through. Sometimes it's just as simple as restructuring all the debt, or like I said in the earlier example, just bringing forward a construction to ease out things. Generally, it starts unraveling when you haven't been in touch with the portfolio, you haven't been, it's a set and forget. Property investing is not set and forget.
Correct.
Yeah,
it's not passive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just be proactive, take control.
Absolutely, yep.
From the beginning, and like if you talk about a worst case scenario, dare I say it, a really good example in today's environment would be that if you've got to cross securitize your portfolio to get some liquidity out of it, if that's the worst thing that you've got to do, so be it. Because at least you get to hang on to the portfolio if it's a good performing or well performing portfolio, and just cash flow and liquidity is a bit of an issue at the moment, because the trick is longevity. Everyone says it. Every strategist will say that it's actually time in the market as well as timing the market. And so the longer you can control your portfolio, the better off you'll be. And a good example is look at the GFC. Those that sold during the GFC because it wasn't from a lack of equity, it was a lack of cash flow that made them sell. If they had have somehow controlled those properties till today, as long as they're in, like we're talking about any of the major areas, metro areas, they would have been doubled in value.
So I was going to say, how do we summarise this chat, because we're running out of time, and one would be your end game is about controlling property for as long as possible,
Which gives you choice.
And to your point, Victor, if you need to sell property, there is a tax consequence.
Absolutely.
However, but you're selling off future capital gains. So you're selling off potential benefits in the future.
That's true.
So that's a key thing. So when we're thinking about the end game, I guess we can summarise that everyone's end game is different. Everyone's end game is going to be based on what they plan and choose and hope to do at a point in time when they choose to liquidate or stop buying.
And try not to make it exciting once you've got your portfolio in place.
Keep it boring.
Keep it boring.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the way to go. Anything else to finish up with? I think we've probably done that pretty good justice, actually.
Yeah, gone over time again.
Gone over time, but it just there is to me listening to this conversation, there's a lot of moving parts, and there's things that you can control, things you can't control, and concentrating on those things that you can control. But I think it's beneficial to actually seek advice from people who are in this game. I think I'm happy that I don't have to do this myself, because there are some people who have been doing this for many, many years, better than me, you guys included. You're my buyer's agent, who give me a lot of advice and insights. So, but focus on the end game, but don't be, I guess, blinkered or have, what do you call it, channel vision by just only the tunnel vision by looking at the end game.
Yeah.
So
stay in touch with your portfolio.
Good. If our listeners need to know any more information about you guys, Victor, where do they do? Where do they go?
They can reach out to us on our Facebook page, Property Group, RIGHT, or send us an email, questions@rightpropertygroup.com.au.
Brilliant.
And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast.
Yes, it's great, and keep those reviews coming. We do appreciate them. Even if you have, as Victor said, any topics you'd like us to cover, do get in touch, and we'll consider them for sure. It's great. Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
be back again next time.
Thank you, mate.
Remember to check out all the other previous podcasts. There's a good series of them right now, and they range from our most recent one, which was manufacturing equity, which is a great tactic, all the way through to houses versus units. What is the right type of property. So thanks. We'll be back. See ya. Bye bye.